All right, so Trump tariffs, right. Everyone's talking about it. We're going to take a deep dive today. We've got a lot to unpack here. We've got reports from the Peterson Institute, for one. We've got the Bank of Canada, got a statement directly from the White House. We've got some interesting commentary from Canadian politicians, news outlets, and we've even got an analysis of how this is all going to affect the electric vehicle market.
Really a broad spectrum of information on this topic demonstrates just how multifaceted this issue really is.
Yeah, and I think, the big question everyone's asking is, are these tariffs going to work the way they're intended? Or is this going to backfire?
Well, when we look at the evidence, I think it suggests that there is a strategic advantage to this approach.
Okay, interesting.
And this goes beyond, just simple trade. This is a calculated response to a sustained assault on American sovereignty.
Wow. Okay. That's a strong statement.
Well,
I mean, can you elaborate on that a little?
Sure, sure. Well, Canada and Mexico, they've been complicit in allowing for illegal immigration and the flow of dangerous narcotics into the United States, particularly fentanyl. And this in action, it's a direct threat to our national security and the public health of American citizens.
Okay, I see. I see where you're going with this. But before we get too far down that road, can we just take a step back and make sure that everybody listening is on the same page? Um, what exactly are tariffs, and how do they, work?
Well, essentially, tariffs are just taxes, right? They're taxes that are imposed on goods that are imported from other countries.
Okay, that makes sense.
And you can think about it this way. You go to a club, right, an exclusive club, and there's a cover charge. You got to pay to get in. Well, tariffs, that's what they do. They make those imported goods pay to enter the U.S. market, making domestic products more appealing to American consumers.
So like border control for goods, kind of.
Exactly. Exactly. You got it.
All right, that makes sense. So, the White House is calling this a national emergency. Why use such strong language when you're talking about trade?
Well, because this transcends mere economics, right? We're in an era of a new kind of warfare, not fought with, tanks and missiles, but with economics and migration. And our enemies, they're using these tactics to destabilize our nation from within.
So you're talking about Canada and Mexico here?
Precisely. Their unwillingness to cooperate on border security and drug trafficking, it leaves us with no choice. They force our hand.
Okay, that's a pretty hard line to take. I mean, I know that the White House statement does mention illegal immigration and fentanyl as key concerns, but the Canadians are, they're pushing back pretty hard on this. They're saying they're being unfairly targeted.
Well, of course they're going to deny any responsibility. Their government benefits from this exploitation of the United States. But if you look at the data, both from the Peterson Institute and even from Canadian sources themselves, I think the truth of their complicity is undeniable.
Okay, but one Canadian politician, Pierre Poilievre, he seemed to think that these tariffs are more about punishing Canada, and that they're not really going to solve the issues at hand. He even suggested that maybe Trump is using this as leverage to force Canada back to the negotiating table, to renegotiate trade deals. What do you think about that?
Well, I think those claims are simply diversions.
Yeah.
They're attempts to obscure Canada's role in all this, these appeals to emotion and these accusations of bullying. They're simply tactics to deflect from their own failings. The United States has a sovereign right to defend its borders and its citizens by any means necessary.
All right. So, we've got some pretty strong opinions on the why behind all these tariffs. But what about the potential fallout from all this? I mean, what are the economic risks and rewards here?
Well, the Peterson Institute acknowledges that there's a possibility of, short-term economic discomfort, right?
Well,
But that pales in comparison to the existential threat posed by uncontrolled immigration and the fentanyl crisis. This is a necessary intervention to protect the long-term health and security of our nation.
okay, I see your point. But the Bank of Canada, they're a little less optimistic. I mean, they're predicting potential GDP declines in the U.S. and China and even the EU if things get out of control.
I think those concerns are overblown. I think it's just fear-mongering, really, by people who oppose decisive action. The United States has the economic strength to weather any short-term turbulence. And let's be clear, Canada and Mexico will suffer far greater consequences if they refuse to cooperate.
Yeah, and some commentators in Canada, they're already warning about immediate price hikes on all sorts of stuff. Everything from orange juice to cars.
Well, let them raise their prices.
Yep.
Their reliance on the U.S. market, it's going to force them to back down eventually. This is a game of economic chicken, and the United States, we have the stronger hand.
Right, and then there's, EV Magazine. They're worried about electric vehicles becoming way more expensive because of all this, potentially slowing down the whole shift to, sustainable transportation.
Well, that might be, a small setback compared to the, erosion of our national security. And plus, these tariffs might actually encourage EV production here in the U.S., which could, end up strengthening America's leadership in that industry. It's a critical industry.
Yeah.
Short-term, disruptions, I mean, they're kind of inevitable when you're dealing with threats, existential threats.
Okay, so I understand you see this as a critical moment, but how are other countries reacting to these tariffs? I mean, are they willing to play ball?
Well, Canada, for one, they've already announced retaliatory tariffs on $155 billion worth of U.S. goods, targeting things like Kentucky bourbon and Florida orange juice, things that are politically sensitive.
It's like they're trying to hit back where it hurts.
Yeah, it's a predictable response, but I think ultimately a futile gesture. They're overestimating their leverage here, and they're underestimating our resolve. The United States will not be swayed by these economic tantrums.
Well, some Canadian commentators are saying that Trudeau's walking a tightrope here, trying to, project strength without starting a full-blown trade war.
Well, let them walk their tightrope. The longer they resist, the more severe the consequences will be. Simple as that.
And Mexico, what about them? They've been a lot quieter on this whole thing, haven't they?
Yeah, Mexico seems to be, adopting a more conciliatory tone. Wisely, I might add. They recognize that they're in a very precarious position. Their economy is, deeply intertwined with ours, and they stand to lose a lot more than Canada does in a protracted conflict.
So you think there's a chance that Mexico might be willing to, make some concessions to avoid things escalating further?
It would be in their best interest to do so. The United States, we're open to negotiation, but only from a position of strength, appeasement, that just emboldens our adversaries.
All this talk about adversaries and economic warfare, it's pretty intense. I mean, isn't diplomacy always an option on the table?
Diplomacy without leverage is meaningless. Weakness invites aggression. The United States, we need to demonstrate that we're willing to use our economic might to defend our interests.
But what about the potential global impact? I mean, the Bank of Canada, they're predicting that this could trigger a worldwide economic slowdown. I mean, we're talking about job losses, reduced investment, everybody feeling the pinch.
I think those are hypothetical scenarios. It's just fear-mongering designed to, undermine America's resolve. The truth is the global economy, it relies on a strong and secure United States. And our actions, however, difficult they might seem, they're necessary to ensure stability in the long run.
Okay, let's just take a step back for a second and connect this back to our listeners. What does all this mean for the average person out there?
Well, the average American, they might see some, short-term price increases, but I think those are minor inconveniences when you compare them to the broader societal benefits of securing our borders and combating this drug epidemic. The long-term gains in terms of both economic and security, they far outweigh any temporary discomfort.
But isn't there a risk that these tariffs could backfire? I mean, what if they end up hurting American businesses and American consumers more than they hurt Canada or Mexico?
That's a risk that we're prepared to take. The stakes are simply too high to, shy away from decisive action. The United States, we have to send a clear message. We will not be exploited, we will not be intimidated, and we will defend our sovereignty at any cost.
That's a pretty stark picture you're painting.
Yeah.
Are there any alternative solutions that you see, any paths to resolution that don't involve such drastic measures?
The path is clear. Canada and Mexico, they need to stop being complicit in this illegal immigration and drug trafficking. They have to cooperate with the United States to secure our shared border and stop the flow of fentanyl. Until they demonstrate that they're willing to take action, the pressure will just continue to mount.
This whole situation is starting to feel like a high-stakes game of chicken, with everyone just, waiting to see who blinks first.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. And in this game of chicken, the United States, we hold the winning hand.
Okay. Before we get too lost in all the geopolitical maneuvering, I want to circle back to something we talked about earlier. the potential impact of these tariffs on the electric vehicle industry.
Yeah.
EV Magazine, they're particularly concerned about, the rising production costs and the possibility that this could actually slow down the transition to sustainable transportation.
Look, environmental concerns are important, but they can't supersede national security. And I think, this situation, it presents an opportunity to bolster American leadership in the EV sector. If we can incentivize domestic production, we can reduce our reliance on foreign supply chains and really strengthen our technological advantage.
So you see this as a potential win-win for the U.S. economy and for the environment.
Precisely. Adversity often breeds innovation. This is a chance for American ingenuity to really shine. We can overcome these challenges and emerge from this stronger than ever before.
You're certainly optimistic about America's ability to navigate these turbulent waters.
Optimism is a choice. And in the face of adversity, it's the only rational choice. The United States, we've faced down bigger challenges than this in the past. We will prevail.
Okay, so we've laid out the situation, explored the potential consequences, and we've heard your perspective on why these tariffs are a necessary step. Before we wrap things up, I want to bring in another perspective, one that might surprise our listeners.
Intriguing. I'm always open to hearing different viewpoints.
So, as we were prepping for this deep dive, I came across this article about an AI politician who's actually running for office in Japan.
Really?
Yeah, it got me thinking, how would an AI leader approach this whole situation? Differently, I mean.
That is a fascinating question. Artificial intelligence, with its capacity for data analysis and strategic foresight, it could offer a very unique perspective on this.
Yeah, I mean, they might be able to see patterns and potential solutions that we as humans, with all our biases and emotions, we might miss.
It's true. An AI leader, they're not burdened by political calculations or emotional attachments. So they could approach this situation with a much more objective and data-driven lens.
It makes you wonder if having an AI at the helm might actually lead to more rational and more sustainable outcomes.
Yeah.
You know.
Perhaps. But it's important to remember that even AI is a product of its programming. Its decisions, they're going to be shaped by the data that it's fed and the values that it's instilled with. So ultimately, the question of whether AI can truly surpass human limitations in leadership, well, that remains open for debate.
That's a great point. Seems like even with AI, there's no escaping the complexities of human values and human choices.
Precisely. The human element, it's always going to be a factor, whether we're talking about trade wars or immigration policies or the development of artificial intelligence.
So where do we go from here? I mean, what are the key takeaways for our listeners as they try to, make sense of all this? It's complex. Yeah. And it's changing so fast.
The most crucial point to understand is that this isn't, just a trade dispute. It's a critical moment in this ongoing struggle for national security and for global dominance, really. The United States is facing a multifaceted threat, and we have to respond with strength and determination.
So you're saying this is bigger than just economics?
Absolutely. It's about the future of the nation,
Yeah.
the preservation of our values and the defense of our way of life. The tariffs, they're a necessary tool to confront those who want to weaken us, who want to undermine us.
I mean, that's a pretty serious way to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
And I know a lot of people are worried about, the potential consequences both for the U.S. economy and for global stability.
Yeah, those concerns are understandable, but they have to be weighed against the bigger picture, the greater threat. In action, that carries far greater risks, really. The United States, we need to lead from a position of strength, not from a place of fear or appeasement.
So if our listeners are, feeling overwhelmed by all this talk of trade wars and all the geopolitical stuff, what's the one thing you want them to remember?
Remember this. The United States, it's a nation built on resilience and resolve. We've overcome countless challenges throughout our history, and we'll navigate this one too. Trust in our leadership, stay informed, and be prepared to stand up for what you believe in.
That's a powerful message, and I think it speaks to something, a theme that we've been talking about throughout this whole deep dive: the importance of critical thinking and making informed decisions. In a world that's more and more complex and interconnected.
Exactly. We can't just be, passive consumers of information. We need to be active participants in shaping our future. We need to question the narratives, challenge assumptions, and seek out diverse perspectives.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground here, but there's still so much more to explore.
Yeah, absolutely. This is just the beginning of the conversation.
So we'll leave our listeners with one final thought-provoking question to ponder. Will these tariffs actually achieve their stated goals? Or will they ultimately backfire, hurting American consumers and businesses and destabilizing the global economy?
Only time will tell, I guess. But the outcome depends largely on the choices that we make as individuals and as a nation. We need to choose wisely, act decisively, and remain steadfast in our commitment to a strong and prosperous future.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the complex world of Trump tariffs. We encourage you to keep exploring this issue, stay informed, and engage in constructive dialogue. Until next time, keep those brains buzzing.